to the AAMplify podcast. Today we're talking about key performance indicators and which ones business development professionals should be measuring. My name is Pat Huegel, Marketing Manager at AAFCPAs in New England, and I'm hosting this podcast today with Jason Jobgen, Director and Business Developer at BKD. Jason has over 17 years of experience in various marketing roles at BKD and is a great resource to discuss the KPIs that accounting marketers should be tracking. So as a marketer myself, we're always talking about what we should be tracking, how, when, for who, why, are we spending time and energy on the right things? And it seems to change a lot. With that in mind, let's jump right into what is the most important thing for business developers to measure, do you think?
Yeah, for me, if you are a 100% dedicated business development executive, which means that your role is 100% focused on sales, I think the most important thing that you measure is revenue, is how much revenue were you responsible for, or at least contributed to bringing into the firm. And is that number, hopefully it is, higher than what it costs to have you there? That is what firm leaders are looking at. They may throw out a lot of KPIs they use to manage business development executives, but at the end of the day, I think they oftentimes will look at, bottom line, once someone has had a little bit of a ramp-up time, what's the revenue? What are they contributing to the firm? It's probably one of the easiest things to measure in our space, whether it's business development executives or marketing executives, because it's a very simple number. It's either there or it's not. Now, it's important, I think, that you're on the same page with, number one, how you measure that number. So when does a dollar get attributed to revenue that you help bring in? It's important that you're on the same page with your firm on that. And it's important that you're on the same page just with what KPIs are important to the firm. So if your firm hired you to set up appointments and that's what they're measuring your success on, then that's the KPI you should be measuring. I think if your firm hired you to generate proposal opportunities and that is what they're measuring and everyone's on the same page, but that's what you should focus on. But for me, I think that the number one thing for all sales executives to be focused on is that one number, revenue.
That makes sense. Outside of revenue, would you say there's any other KPIs that you would track during the year that indicate either one way or the other?
I do. I think that KPIs for business development executives are probably broken into two buckets. And so you've got those that are related to, and really all of them can be related to both buckets, but those that are related more to activity, and those are maybe related more to end results. And so if you think about activity, KPIs like how many targets did you convert to active pursuits during the month, quarter, year? How many pursuits did you convert into proposal opportunities during the month, quarter, year? What's your close ratio on those proposals? Now, for some business development executives, that close ratio is a little bit out of their hands because once the proposal is generated, they're kind of removed from the process. You hope that's not the case, but in some cases that is. And then on the other side is, how do you measure the actual results? So I mentioned, the most important KPI I think is revenue, but how do you measure that revenue? What's the value of that revenue? And I think it's important that you are paying attention to not just the dollars, but are those dollars, is that annuity work for the firm, or is that a one-time project for the firm? And the value should be measured differently. A lot of firms actually measure it differently in the compensation plans for business development executives, whether it's an annuity client or a one-time project. What's the size of the client? Maybe the billings aren't huge, but this may be a marquee name in your marketplace that you help land. And there should be some value assigned to that as well. How you assign that value, again, is something you need to work out with the firm that you work with, but that's what I see on the back end. The results, what's the dollar value of what we won, and what's the other value of those dollars? How profitable are those dollars for us?
Right. So in your opinion, what do business developers focus too much on these days?
first of all, you just asked me, what some of my top KPIs are, and I think 3 of those that I listed were activity-based. So activity is important. I think that business developers in our industry can tend to focus too much on activity and not enough on what their firms want to see as far as results. And so, it's great if you can come forward and say, look, I attended 10 networking events last month, and I dropped off cookies to 20 prospects, and I took 5 prospect meetings, and look at all this that I did, if there's not the results to follow that. And so I think that, in our industry, we love numbers, and we tend to track those stats. Those stats are important. It shows us if we're heading towards our goal, but you got to hit those goals. You got to hit those numbers, because I see a lot of business development executives in our industry over the years that have been very good at producing activity, but just weren't able to produce the results from that activity.
Yeah.
So focusing too much on activity.
Yeah. Yeah, and in the end, like you said, it's all about the revenue.
Yeah.
Have you seen that kind of evolve at accounting firms over the span of your career?
I have. I think that, especially, over the last probably 10 years and really over the last 5 years, I've seen more and more firms focus on more than just the KPIs that we're talking about today, actually, focus more on strategy, allowing the business development executives to really, if not drive, then heavily participate in pursuit strategy, rather than, look, you're a business development executive, we hired you to go kick open some doors, put the right partner in front of the right prospect, and get out of our way, we'll handle everything else. I think there's a lot more value put in what these sales professionals bring to the table at firms now. I think we're all struggling with how to measure that, though. So when you think about, how do you create a performance indicator for how good someone is at driving strategy in a pursuit, or market strategy for that matter. We're still trying to get there, but I think we're seeing more and more cases where you may have firms that actually have built into the compensation plan, what was your role in this pursuit? So maybe you did kick open the door and you put the right partner in front of the right prospect and you kind of got out of the way. And maybe that has one value. And on another pursuit, maybe you were really the driver on that pursuit, and that has another value. And so I think that's really evolved. When I first started in our industry, I didn't see a whole lot of business development executives truly driving strategy. They were more get out and get us connected with the right people, and our partners that are the rainmakers were the ones to take it from there.
Right. So over the course of that time, have you seen, we've kind of talked about what are the goals, what are the things we're measuring. Have you seen any missteps happen over the course, especially as business developers take on maybe more of a broader role in terms of developing KPIs? What missteps have you seen?
I think the major missteps that I've seen are cases where there are none developed on the front end. So you're a mid-sized CPA firm in a large market, and you go out and you hire a business development executive, and you say they're a professional, they'll go out and sell, and you've got firm leadership. No one actually comes to the table and says, these are the KPIs that we're going to focus on. But instead, you have firm leadership focusing on one set of indicators, and you have business development executives maybe focusing on another set. Or maybe they're focusing on the same thing, but measuring it in different ways. And they don't have that conversation on the front end. I think that is the biggest misstep that I see firms make, but also business development executives make in those firms, not getting everyone on the same page, making sure that leadership and the business development executive are all measuring the same thing in the same way. And that when you have that, whether a business development executive is successful or not is pretty black or white, because you're all measuring the same things.
Right.
Instead, what you end up having is a lot of business development executives come into our industry, spend 1 to 3 years in our industry, and leave our industry with the thought that, well, I wasn't successful because they didn't understand what I was doing.
Right.
And the firms say, well, we tried to bring in a salesperson a few years ago, but they weren't successful because, we didn't really understand what they were doing. and no one gets on the same page on the front end. So you have conversations, whether it's the BDE leaving our industry or the firm ending the relationship, that's a bit of a surprise for one or both parties when it shouldn't be. Those numbers should all be there. We should know if we're being successful and what we're shooting for or not.
Yeah, that all sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
So last question, is there a KPI that you're focused on improving right now?
There are a couple that I'm going to be focusing on here in the near term. And again, I started our conversation talking about how important results are as compared to activity. But in the next 6 months, my focus is going to be on a couple of KPIs that are activity-based. And here's why. I work in a specialty niche within the firm. And so we have been, we've had we're wrapping up the third of 3 very successful years. Lots of growth. I'd like to take credit for that, but I really can't. The legislative landscape has really helped us a lot because the tax practice. Tax reform was a bit of a gift for this one practice for us. But I'm hyper aware that starting in summer of 2019 and into 2020, I have some challenges ahead to be able to sustain that growth and not have the practice, the top number of the practice anyway, retract. And so I'm going to, in the next probably 90 days here, be meeting with a lot of the folks from our marketing department to talk about what we can do to increase our at-bats in this practice. And so the KPIs, when you think about what I'm going to be focusing on here, I'm going to be focusing on more prospect meetings. What do we need to do to get out and get in front of more non-clients who may need this service? And I'll be measuring that on a month-to-month basis. We shot for 20 prospect meetings for the group, someone in the group to take in the month of June. Did we hit it or not? If not, why? Is it still an accomplishable goal? And then more proposal opportunities from those. And so, we have historically circled around a 50% conversion rate on initial prospect meetings in this practice to proposals, which is, if you think about our industry, it's very, very high. But that's because we go in with such a specific service, these prospects are pretty highly qualified before we step into that initial meeting. We pretty much know they have a need. They may or may not know they have a need, but we believe that they are qualified for the service. So we're either coming in and explaining what we can do for them, or we are simply talking about a service they're maybe using someone else for and convincing them to try us instead. And so we're pretty successful once we get to that point. But those are the 2 KPIs I'm going to be hyper focused on in the next 6 months. More prospect meetings with new prospects, converting more of those prospect meetings into proposal opportunities. And we make a pretty good case for ourselves. So, another key KPI for me here will be converting those proposals into revenue.
Yeah.
Wins. So that's what I'll be focused on here in the summer of 2019. My job is about to be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, it sounds like obviously the end results are what really matter ultimately, but those activity KPIs really help you measure as you go along and see what's working, what's not, maybe in a more real-time basis.
Yeah, and I would say, before we close out here, for new BDEs that are new to our industry, those activity KPIs are important to track because you're going to have a runway. You're not going to land $1 million your first month on the job. You may think you are, but maybe you will. I doubt it. So it's important that you're tracking those things and communicating that with firm leadership so they understand you are making progress towards that end result. You are getting them up to bat. You are getting them in front of the right prospects, and you are converting those prospects into down the pipeline. So it is important to track those, especially in your first 2 years, because there won't be a whole lot of revenue in your first 6-12 months to be able to track as you're starting to get your feet under you and build those relationships.
Sure. Great. Well, thank you very much, Jason, for your time and expertise. And I'd like to thank everyone watching for joining us on this podcast. And watch out for next month's AAMplify podcast.